And now, Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for a show on Deborah Kobylt Live that I'm extremely excited about. Sue O, thank you so much for being here, the Executive VP of Senior VP of Education, Exhibitions, Community Engagement at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. Gosh, it's a pleasure and honor to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, let's start off with a very, very special exhibit that's ongoing right now at the museum through April, and it's called Becoming Jane. And it has been developed entirely by National Geographic. And I've attended this on many occasions, and it's absolutely extraordinary. It's an interactive exhibit. And I'm going to have you tell me a little bit about the exhibit. And gosh, I don't even think Jane has seen this exhibit yet, right? So let's hear about it.
No, Jane has not seen this exhibit, and we are unfortunately it opened up in DC right before the pandemic. So many of us are working to try to make sure she sees the exhibition before it closes. So we opened in November 7th, 2021, and it's running through April 17th. So there's a few more weeks left to come out and see this exhibit. It's called Becoming Jane: The Evolution of Dr. Jane Goodall, and this is her legacy exhibition, even though she's living, and it's on the foundation of her work, in which she also founded the Jane Goodall Institute. She's a UN Messenger of Peace, and it's specifically in the science fields of science and conservations, and it's celebrating all the ways an individual can make an impact in their world. So it goes through her early years when she was a young woman to fulfilling the dream of learning and researching animals in Tanzania, Africa. Shows herself establishing herself as a scientist with the research at Gombe, Tanzania. And then her current and really active role as an activist, mentor, and advocate for making a better world for life on Earth. There are multiple, and we had a lot of chances to experience new tech. We have a multi-screen experience about the Gombe National Park. We also have a hologram projection of Dr. Jane Goodall, so you feel like she's there with you, talking about her research memories and her feelings and her thoughts. We have an interactive chimpanzee hoot and pant, so you can kind of imagine yourself communicating with the animals, and lots of other just kind of I would say a little bit tricks maybe, but something to make you feel like you are there, because if you can't go there, the exhibition helps get you there. She also has in her early childhood, her childhood toy Jubilee, which is kind of threadbare now, chimpanzee that she got when she was 2.5 years old, and she allowed us to show it at the museum. And that's one of the permanent authentic pieces. There's a replica of her research tent. I mean, and many of the visitors kind of saw a typewriter for the first time because we have so many young visitors coming in. There was the typewriter and the lamp and the table that she worked out on, and the really modest cot that she slept on. And one of the features that we put in is a iPad tablet-based Spanish translation for our multilingual audiences here in Los Angeles. And one of the last pieces is we call the call to action. I think once you learn what you learn about what's going on in the world, the call to action is the activist portion and the ability to make change. So that's a really important piece that I think culminates at the end of this exhibit.
Gosh, there's so much I could say because I was so moved by this exhibit. As soon as I entered and you talked about her childhood toy, I love the way there's a flow to this exhibit, right? We learn about her childhood. I'm very much about understanding a person's childhood. And if we could see where they came from and what they were like as children, we get a real glimpse into who they may or may not become, right? And she was undoubtedly an old soul. And I love that about her. And I also love the inspiration, the person who actually brought her to that park to do this research, and also her mom who accompanied her as well. Can you talk about all that, about who inspired her and also her mom. A lot of people don't know about her mom, that she was there for much of this time.
I think there was a lot, maybe our first mentors are our own parents and our own family members. And she referred back to her mother quite a bit in terms of giving her the tenacity and the patience to go for what she wanted to go for. And that's extremely important when you're in those critical points where things become challenging. There was a unique opportunity within her youth when she was invited with a friend to Africa. And I think that was life-changing and just reinstated the focus that she had. And she met Dr. Louis Leakey, who everyone knows is a very famous science researcher based out in Africa. So that was the beginning of the hyper focus, I would say, that she put on. It seemed like she was a scientist in the making, whether you gave that title to her or not. Just the entire story of watching a hen lay an egg, the amount of patience and the curiosity and the process one takes to learn about something that happens. That is, in the essence, the scientists operate in a process about observing, getting the answers, not giving up, learning how to reset your experiments so you can get to kind of more of the truth. And so she had that foundational kind of approach within her being. And so when she finally went to Africa and someone gave her a chance to do it, kind of breaking the traditional rules of being a scientist, not coming in with the PhD and all the requirements, it actually freed her to approach this in a very organic and holistic way.
Right, just to see the relationship that had never been documented before between human beings and chimpanzees. I love how she talks about the tools, right, that were used, that the chimpanzees used. There's so much there. So that's why I really want to encourage people to go. Everyone knows who Jane Goodall is, but in this exhibit, we get to learn more about her as the human being and how that reflected in all of her research. Her calmness, her reserve, as you said, her kindness and compassion, all was sort of the foundation also of her incredible research, because you need that to take all that time, right, to do what she did. Could you speak to that?
Well, when she was describing a typical day, she would leave first thing in the morning and not come back till the entire end of the day. And she was in situ. She was in the situation where she was sitting and observing for very extended periods of time the animals that she wanted to learn more about, the chimpanzees. So that there is a certain amount of discipline and tenacity a researcher needs to have out in the field. It is definitely not for the timid. And there were many weather conditions I think she's had to endure. And as she went back to that tent, low light, going back and taking the notes and really putting all the details down of what she observed. I mean, her notebooks, I imagine, are the critical piece to all the work that she's done. But she observed more than just the animals. She met local people. She understand the community that this park sat in, and the how it affected both the community and the animals. And I think that kind of bigger thinking that comes out of a very close observation of something small is extremely I guess she was a little ahead of her time. And we talk a lot about environmentalism and climate change and conservation now. She's been doing this for decades.
She has.
She really has been a leader, and that consistency through the times when things are difficult and messages can change, I think as a science communicator on top of being a scientist has been one of the biggest gifts she's given our community over the years.
Talk to me about her mom who accompanied her on this. I mean, she was a young girl and her mom was there with her, by her side. She was back at the tent waiting for Jane, and she was her confidant, right?
Yeah, I think her mother was foundational to, if you think about this, this is like strong women. She lost her father at a young age. I mean, this is, the Jane, there are female researchers in Africa, behavioralists, that followed Jane's legacy, right? There are other
Yeah.
researchers that followed in that path once they got to see the a strong woman, and to be that comfortable and strong is to be supported by someone like your mother or another strong figure. And her mother took the journey with her and probably watched out for her in ways that we probably don't even know, because that's the job. And I think that's like what all great moms have is the superpower with their kids.
Can you describe to us, and this is in the exhibit, the moment that she realized that the chimpanzees would trust her, right? I mean, she gave them names. She realized they had personalities, and this had never been done before. Can you talk to us about that moment when they came to her, when they realized they trusted her? I get goosebumps even thinking about it. It just is an extraordinary moment for me. But could you tell our viewers what they will see when they go to this exhibit?
Well, as with all, I think there was a hierarchy of assumption about what these animals could be like and whether they had any characteristics that are close to what we can empathize with as human beings. So I think that moment when she discovered that, it put us, the empathy that comes out of really understanding another being or animal, and we're actually part of that same world. So we are actually animals too in the world. We're not actually separated. There's an evolutionary connection to some animals. I think is really impactful in terms of how we share this earth, this environment, and this space together. And it was really groundbreaking, and then of course science is not magic. You need to be able to repeat, so
that's right.
So then you have the data and the research to continue those observations and allow for a deeper relationship and kind of nonverbal cues in how you understand each other. And I think that's another piece is we think communication, well, not we, human beings intend communications all based on talking. But as we know, there's body language, there's all sorts of affective behaviors that show what relationships can be like, and the social structures that they have in their group, the protectiveness, who's a leader, all those things, all those behavioral things are tremendous. And that is something you can't get from studying a fossil, for example, which we do a lot at the museum. It comes from direct observation and interaction.
You also learned so much about her personal life while she was there, right? Her photographer, he became her husband. He became her husband. They have a child together. It was just sort of them out in the fields, and of course the community, right? Tell me about how the community embraced them, because they really did. They really also were very instrumental in the work that she was doing, right? The community there.
Yeah, I think for any research that happens within a community, there's no way, whether you're a mountain hiker, whether you are in the field, there's no way to truly do that without the participation or the relationship building you have with the local community. But I think the other part, and what is so excellent about her observation skills, that she understood the needs of that same community rather than taking only from the point of view of I'm here on a mission. But she, and that I think extends into eventually the founding Roots and Shoots and all these conservation and economic efforts. She was trying to revitalize those local communities and give back to the place that provided the location of research where she had. That's extremely important. And there's some authenticity in your relationship building where people know if you're there for the right reasons, I guess is the best way to say it. I think there was a point where she mentioned if there's an avenue for helping them economically, that would also help them not have to disturb the environment in order to live. That was a really acute observation, because many times we like to separate all these pieces, and it's not. It's intertwined in who we are.
Yeah. She quickly became sort of a sensation, right? With her discoveries. Can you talk to us about that? I mean, there were newspaper clippings about her, about this young, beautiful young scientist. This has never happened before. Can you talk to us about that too?
Well, I imagine being the first and being so charismatic and, as you said, old soul, very centered, right? The centeredness
Yeah.
we see with her now seems like she always had that, right? And she was also a National Geographic fellow, so they put a lot of, just based on what they put out there, they put a lot of focus on and highlighting that, and hopefully that actually gave a lot of inspiration for young women to pursue, if not the same, other careers within science or other adventures in which they were willing to go do that. And the sensation, I think what was great is she remained humble through all of this, because you imagine that kind of attention can really take over, and in that humility really stay on point and on message about what she wants to do in terms of environmentalism, sustainability, conservation, so that is really noteworthy, frankly, because many people come, I mean, YouTube, people can become famous really really quickly nowadays, but you have to keep your center. And when you keep your center and stick to your core values, that is what makes her remarkable, frankly. Right?
I think there's no doubt about it. But I think the more notoriety, the more it fueled her passion, even more so, because there was no ego there. It just really fueled that scientific part of her that wanted to keep going. Now, how many years has she been doing this work there in Tanzania with the chimpanzees? I think like 40 years or more, right? How long has she been doing this?
I didn't know that you were going to ask me this exact question.
Oh, that's okay.
Decades, I mean, I would say decades, right? So decades. But the last several decades, she's been spending a lot of time in being a messenger for this work.
Yeah. In fact, her latest book, which is also available at the museum, because I really would love for people to go and visit this exhibit. Her book, Hope, I think is extraordinary. It's a survival guide for trying times, and sort of many of the lessons that she has learned through her work, through her times. Her quiet resolve really comes through to me in this book. I can hear her voice. I know that you obviously have read this as well. Can you speak perhaps to she's a living naturalist, right? But the 4 reasons for hope. We spoke about that, right, when we were off.
Yeah, we did. And this is why I envy her, because the many of these things, topics around climate change, conservation, the Anthropocene era, the human impact on environment, we have always been trying to find the right ways to communicate that in a positive light, so it doesn't feel like doom and gloom. And this is why she's so good at what she does. But some of the things that she's mentioned in her 4 reasons for hope was the amazing human intellect, human beings as innovators, the resilience of nature, which is absolutely true. You see efforts around the world around conservation, and people have been able to bring back almost extinct species or bring back environments. Nature has an amazing way of recovering, even through devastation of climate change and wildfires and all sorts of things. The power of young people, her ability to really think about our future and what the future can do for us. And what she said, the indomitable human spirit. She is an optimist, and you can imagine the things that she's probably seen over the course of her life that can be discouraging, especially in places like Africa. And she said that she added a 5th one, kind of, but not officially, is the power of social media. The communication tool of social media has really provided opportunities for movements. And I always use the word movement because it's almost bigger than yourself. There is an energy, there is a flow, and there's an overwhelming need that compels you towards a direction. And so those have been really wonderful to hear her talk about it. But in particular, when she was talking about young people, she specified the energy, the passion, and the commitment of young people once they think about solving a problem. And the last example I think I told you when we were talking offline is that being able to think globally, but translating that into acting locally. Because
absolutely.
Oftentimes when you think about the kind of wicked problems in the world or the wicked problems around environment or climate, it can seem like undoable, like you can't kind of penetrate that. But if each individual, as she says, acts locally to make a change, and there's enough cumulative individuals do that, it actually does make a difference. And that is one of the biggest through lines, I think, besides her legacy story, is the ability of a single person to be so impactful. And you see that in this exhibition. So imagine if many people put that effort forward, how much, greater the impact could be exponentially. So
also, she clearly went into her studies as a scientist with curiosity. And you have to do that, right? You have to do that as a journalist too. You have to go in there without preconceived notions. You have to be informed, but you have to be curious and just see what happens. And that's what I loved about watching her and reading her many, many books, this one in particular, that you have to allow yourself that space, right? And I think that's a great lesson also, like if kids were to go and see this exhibit, I know you've had many, that you have to give yourself that space to just be silent and see what comes to you. Do you know what I mean?
I agree. I think she inherently understands that. I think many had to, in a strange way, maybe that COVID forced us to create spaces like that, both for self-care and reflection. You need a space like that to be creative. It seems counterintuitive to say, why can't I just muscle through this thing I want to do? But after you take in information, after you take in observation and all the things that you're learning, you want to be able to then give yourself the space to really see what's going on and then decide what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, and she clearly did that. That made an impression upon me. And with her hologram, and I've heard her speak and seen her speak so many, many times, but that's just who she is, right? The soul of Jane Goodall is someone who quietly listens, observes, and as a good scientist, then makes deductions upon what she is observing. And I really, truly love that about her. I hope people get that out of this beautiful exhibit as well. By the way, to comment on your social media, how she understands the power of social media, I was quite excited because I promoted this on my social media today, on my Instagram, and there was a little something from Jane Goodall. Now, I'm sure it was her people, but I was thrilled. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, could that be her or is that her people? I'd love to know. But either way, just the power of it, she knows that we're talking about this today or someone there. And it just goes to show how quickly you can connect with someone. Absolutely. If you use social media for the right thing, right? If you just use it for the right stuff. So I was very excited personally. So thank you.
True. Congrats.
Let's talk a little bit about you, because you've got quite a fantastic position there at the museum. And again, off camera, we talked a little bit about what you do, your career, also an outstanding career for a woman. Wasn't always the case that a woman could be in a position such as yourself. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you do there specifically at the museum? Then we're going to talk about some of the exhibits that you could share.
Sure. So I oversee the Education, Exhibitions, and Programs Department. I often say that our job is to engage the public in person, online, and through learning spaces from pre-K, early childhood, all the way to what we call purposeful aging. And really adopting all the many ways in people like to learn. And you probably often hear that with folks, or someone's like, I'm visual, I'm audio. We have a strong dedication to being authentic here and intentional in our work. And so that includes playful things like we have a performing arts group. I have mobile museum programs that are off-site and on-site here to welcome over 200,000 pre-pandemic school and teachers all throughout Los Angeles County and the southern region of California. So we hope to get those numbers back as people are easing back into travel on behalf of schools. Public programming, many times there's been studies that occurred with Richard Luke that 95% of our kind of outdoor and science education come outside the classroom. So we are in what we call an informal space. And if our values are to, if our vision is to inspire wonder, discovery, and responsibility, we have many opportunities through the exhibits here, as well as the programs, to offer up inspiration for those individual children and adults. We see ourselves as lifelong learners here as well. Everyone who works here loves to learn as well. So, you know, it's a really, really privileged position I'm in to be able to do this kind of work. And I always tell everybody, I'm never bored. If I have a moment, that I go ask the entomologist, can I see your butterfly collection? Or I take a walk in our nature gardens, or I have a conversation with a researcher who's really passionate about their work in marine fossils or something like that. So there are many opportunities for those of us who are staff, but there's also opportunities to share and learn with our communities who also have expertise to share with us. Not just
absolutely
what Jane does when she goes and has her research. There's also the things that she probably learned from the local communities there.
Yeah. Talk to me about women in science. It's a field that is now growing, blossoming, and it's not so strange now like when it was when I was coming up to have many female scientists. And by the way, the museum has been very generous with me. They've allowed me to go behind the scenes and see some of what you're working on, also at the La Brea Tar Pits, which I know is under your umbrella. The work being done there, the research being done there is really extraordinary globally. So I want to thank you for that also. But there were a lot of women there, right, doing a lot of the work. And that, like I said, that wasn't always the case back in the day. So that's really been changing, right?
Even now, sometimes our president and director is a geologist by training. She's a female scientist, Dr. Lori Bettison Barga. We have several associate curators throughout research and collections, as well as La Brea Tar Pits in very key areas of research. And oftentimes, which is more common, we have many women in education and some of these other fields related to collections and outreach. But, you know, I'm fortunate even to be born in the decade that I was, because I'm sure the barriers were far less than when Jane was kind of doing what she was doing, and even my own, even our own president and director. So I think this says a lot for society, that the way women contribute to science, they have the same discipline on the data and research side, but they also have a perspective that I think is more encompassing, not to be biased. They look at more of the environment of everything that's going on, and oftentimes they're great mentors and great colleagues to have. So diversity in general, just like in the natural world, diversity is actually important for the overall health of the ecosystem. Diversity within the science and research is really extremely important. Be able to make the discoveries. Many times these teams are actually multidisciplinary. Many folks on, oftentimes you see research page, there'll be like 10 authors credited. So some of the best research happens in collaboration with diverse researchers.
Yeah. Talk to people about how history and fossils and everything that's on display at the museum is so important and pertainable to today and our future. We could talk about climate change and all of that, how it's all related to what happened tens of thousands of years ago is very, very pertainable to today, right?
Wow, you ask tough questions, journalist by training. So we're one of the few natural history museums on the West Coast. One of the few public, I'm not going to say few science research organizations because there are several within universities and private, but we promise to be stewards of these collections on behalf of our society. And in order maybe to create solutions for the future, you want to know where you came from, what you're doing now, and how you look towards the future. And some of those solutions also reflect the values of society now. So in, you know, things like history where we think it actually changes, right? As you get more information, as you understand more about where history lies, as these stories that were not told emerge. So being truthful about our history is one big thing that we need to start. Understanding where we came from, our past, is extremely important for us to kind of be grounded as we think about our future. And what's great about science, you know, I think when I grew up, I thought science was finite, like math. 1 + 1 = 2. That's it.
Exactly.
Science is not the case. Science is a process. And through that process, you can continue to make new discoveries, even about things from the past. And those discoveries help you think about innovation, or in many cases, sometimes our role is to document the biodiversity. And then you put all the pieces together. What was the environment like when this happened? Who was around? What were the interventions? There are a lot of questions. Sometimes it leads into more questions. I mean, I think Jane said she had lots of questions, and it was the endless search to answer those questions. So that's important. And along the way, there's so many new possibilities that happen, and young people that go into science to kind of expand the way we think about looking at the future. But biodiversity, documentation of biodiversity in our collections is really important. We have major areas of research that we have deep collections. I know it wasn't our organization, but there was another collection that they said they could look back at the rats from the 1918 pandemic and saying, like, what could we learn from that to understand this today? So if you have a good record, you can kind of go back and start asking different questions than maybe what was asked at that same time. But you have all the specimens and the data to help you look at that. And sometimes that different perspective is enough to really think of a new solution. So I have a lot of admiration for our research and collections team, and they really shepherd and steward and take care of over 30 million collection items. Less than 2% are on display, to be honest with you. They're highly organized and cataloged, and then that's the job of the exhibits team, is to try to bring more out to the floor and to the public to share.
Well, I think you do an extraordinary job with it. I have to tell you, my children, when they were really young, they pretty much lived at the museum there, because you also have fantastic programs in the summertime for them, and all sorts of different little areas to study. And that the way you do it was, in a way, even different than how they did it at school. It was so interactive, and I think that's what we need, right? We need that so that children are more excited about getting involved in science, and they see that any question is a good question. And I really love that you do that, and that you accept that. Anything you'd like to add? There's a couple of fantastic exhibits also ongoing that are coming up. Right, butterfly exhibit, I think that just started there. If you want to talk briefly about that. And then we'll end, I guess, on Jane, or anything else you want to bring up.
So we have the butterfly pavilion that it's open now. We call the Pavilion of Wings. It has not, it's been one of the few things that we've been able to consistently keep open during the opening and closings of the pandemic, because it is outdoors. We bring some beautiful butterflies from all over the world into one location, including the blue morpho. And it's just pure joy and wonder, frankly. And there's science in there too about the process, because we get them they haven't chrysalised yet when we get them, but that will run through Labor Day weekend. And then a couple weeks after that, it turns into a spider pavilion. So it's a cycle of nature. At the end of the month, we will be opening LA Underwater, which is a prehistoric look at Los Angeles, because Los Angeles used to be underwater thousands and thousands of years ago, and there are specimens in there to just remind. I think it's sometimes Angelenos forget our history has a vertical or geological history, and not just from kind of above the ground, as they say. So what's interesting is La Brea Tar Pits has the tar pits, the asphalt seeps that are in the city where people can see that kind of history live. And we're under a major, we're pretty soon into a construction project, the NHM Commons, which is a new building space that will be for the people of Los Angeles. So there'll be some photographic exhibits next year, but I can't kind of quite tell you what they are yet. But we are always, and our permanent exhibits are always wonderful. The Gem and Mineral Hall is extremely popular. The dioramas are, as you say, very classic. They're almost storybooks on their own. Nobody has dinosaurs like our dinosaur hall. And the Nature Lab, which is about nature in Los Angeles, is really fun. And every once in a while, it's usually in conjunction with the research paper, we'll put out a single display on a wonderful specimen. So we have an ichthyosaur right now. A couple months ago, we had a great anglerfish that was a community find, meaning someone was on the beach and found it, and it ended up in our museum, and we got to display it, and it was a really rare find. So
absolutely extraordinary, the work that you're doing there. And you don't exactly have a dino-sized staff either. You're doing so much, all of you, right? I know that you like that, huh? Dino-sized.
But I like that. I liked how you segued into that.
No, because I know that, because I've been there enough times, and I think, gosh, there's a certain number of people doing an awful lot of work, and also you've got some terrific volunteers there that are helping you out. I want to give a shout out to them. I wanted just to read a little quote from the Hope book before we go. "You see," said Jane, "they learn that everything is interconnected, and that their community is not just the people around them, but the animals and the plants and the land itself." And this is from the chapter of the power of young people. And that really says so much about Jane and about this book. Are there any parting words you'd like to say about Jane, about the exhibit, about her book, or honestly anything?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for allowing us to share this time. I've really been privileged to be able to learn more about Jane's story over the last several years, more in-depthly. And I hope this inspires others to kind of follow their dreams and pursue with a passion of the things they want to in order to change themselves and the world around them. So
yeah, at any age, honestly, young or old. I mean, there's so much that we can do, right? Gosh, yeah. Sue, thank you so very much. People, please go and see the exhibit at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles County in downtown LA, kind of right near the USC campus. It's an extraordinary museum. I mean, I could spend days there. I love the little cafeteria there. There's just so much about that museum, and we barely even touched upon it. But I'd like to thank you so much for giving us your time. It would be wonderful if Jane should visit. There's some rumors out there that she may be visiting the museum to see this exhibit, and gosh, I hope that happens, because how extraordinary will that be? Can you tell us anything, or you're not sure?
Still working on it.
Still working on it. That's a good answer, because gosh, I just think that would be so exciting for her. So I hope that happens as well. Anyway, thank you so much, Sue O, and everyone over there at the Natural History Museum. I've met so many extraordinary people. So thank all of you. I look forward to speaking to you again soon on some upcoming exhibits. And my name is Deborah Zara Kobylt. The show is Deborah Kobylt Live. You can find us anywhere on all audio platforms as a podcast, also on our YouTube channels, on our Facebook, on our IGTV, and just about anywhere else you'll find our show. So thanks for tuning in to Deborah Kobylt Live. Thank you so much, the museum, and thank you, Sue O, for joining.